The Transcontinental Railroad, what it is, and how it changed the US. Way back in the mid-1800s, the United States had vast lands waiting to be explored. People in the East wanted to go west, but there was just one problem. The country was ginormous! Taking a trip out west was not for the faint-hearted. It took months to travel across the country. To make it easier, a wild idea was formed. Build a railroad that stretched from the Atlantic to the Pacific Ocean. This wasn't a walk in the park. The workers had to chisel through rugged mountains, blast through rocks, and lay tracks in the blazing hot desert. But eventually, on May 10, 1869, the railroad was complete. People could now travel from one coast to the other in record time. No more long, bumpy wagon rides. The Transcontinental Railroad was transformative for America. Here are some of the effects that it had. Number 1. Money. The railroad stimulated economic growth. What does that mean, you ask? Well, imagine you had some toys to sell. Before the railroad, you couldn't sell to many people because it would be too difficult to send your toys to people who live far away. But with the railroad, you could put them on a train and it would quickly take them to different places across the country. This means more people could buy your toys, making you more money. The railroad itself also created jobs. Many people worked to build the railroad, and once it was finished, they needed people to run and maintain the trains. As more people used the railroad, new towns started popping up along the tracks. People settled near the railroad because it made it easier for them to buy and sell, travel, and find jobs. These towns grew bigger, which means more people started opening shops and factories, which created even more jobs. Effect number 2. National unity. The completion of the Transcontinental Railroad not only greatly shortened travel time between the East and the West, it also promoted a sense of national unity by physically linking the country and helping the spread of people and ideas. It also strengthened the federal government's ability to rule such a huge nation. Effect number 3. Western expansion. In the early days of the US, there was a constant move westward. The Transcontinental Railroad was important in this movement towards the American West. It provided a reliable means of transportation, making it easier to reach and create communities in the Western territories. Effect number 4. Technological advancement. The Transcontinental Railroad needed some really impressive engineering and technology to build, so lots of improvements were made. Things like making better trains, tracks, and telegraph lines. Effect number 5. Time standardization. Before the Transcontinental Railroad, different towns in the United States had their own local times. This meant that when it was noon in one place, it was a different time in another place, even if they were really close by. It could be quite confusing when people travelled from one town to another. This created a problem because trains have schedules and it's important for them to arrive and set off at a certain time. We don't want people to miss their train. So the people who ran the trains came up with something called time zones. They divided the country into different sections and gave each section its own time. This meant that people could say a specific time and everyone would know what they meant regardless of where they were. However, naturally, it's not all good news. The Transcontinental Railroad passed through lands where Native Americans had been living for a very long time. These people had their own homes, hunting grounds, and way of life. But the construction of the railroad disrupted all of that. To get the land to build the railroad, the government made agreements with Native Americans, but these agreements often took away their land without their full consent. Native Americans had to leave their homes, often through threat of violence. The railroad also caused damage to the environment. Trees were cut down as the land was cleared to make space for the tracks. This affected the animals that Native Americans relied on for food. The Transcontinental Railroad was an important milestone in US history. It helped people to move out west and create the population patterns we see today. It created jobs and opportunities, a sense of national unity, and propelled advancements in technology and engineering. It even shaped the way we tell time. On the other hand, it led to the destruction of native lands and ways of life. For better or worse though, the Transcontinental Railroad helped to shape the US.